Hello there, I'm Guildmaster Dan, and welcome to a series I've been meaning to do since the inception of my channel. The alignments in Dungeons & Dragons are something that I've always wanted to look at in depth on my channel, precisely because it's so hotly debated by so many gamers out there. Now, of course, my title for this series, Dungeons & Dragons Alignment Done Right, was made in good humor, but I want to take this chance to lay out my intentions for the series now before we get started. Naturally, just like any other mechanic in a game, rules are meant to be interpreted, hence the need for a designated arbitrator of those rules. As such, there are many different interpretations out there of how the Dungeons & Dragons alignments are defined. I'm only going to say this once, and now. What is to follow in the next 10 segments of this series is my interpretation of how the alignments in Dungeons & Dragons are defined. I will no longer refer to it as opinion or interpretation, so be prepared. And without further ado, allow me to present Dungeons & Dragons Alignment Done Right. By far is the most hotly debated topic in Dungeons & Dragons. This stems from the belief that the alignments themselves are subjective and can be interpreted or argued. In this way, one player's interpretation of lawful good can be different from another player's interpretation of lawful good. Each gamer's unique moral codes and definitions come to clash over how they define each alignment. This notion is false. What most gamers tend to forget is that the alignment system was meant to describe very specific sets of behaviors. As such, in this case, the notions of good and evil are objective and cannot be argued or interpreted, for they mean something very specific. The same can be said for lawful and chaotic, though they come with their own problems, namely that the nomenclature infers unintended implications. The easiest way to clear up these misconceptions is by assigning new terms that more closely resemble the intended ideals of the alignment chart. In this way, we see good and evil becoming selflessness versus selfishness, while on the other hand, we see lawful and chaotic becoming principled and unprincipled. Now, very important, neutrality remains the same, as it simply describes the range between the four extremes. Now, we will talk more in depth about each of the 9 primary alignments and how their new nomenclature better describes them in future segments. For now, I will simply note that the reason neutrality does not have to change is due to the nature of the chart itself. Next to believing the alignments to be subjective, the biggest misuse of the chart is this false pretense in its rigidity. Many players believe the 9 alignments to be fixed points that help players to roleplay their characters. This is wrong on 2 levels. First, the character's place on the chart is fluid. As they live their lives, they'll flow this way and that on the 2 axes. That is because the alignments are not there to help a player roleplay their character, but to help a dungeon master describe how the world perceives that character in that moment. While most people believe the alignments to be represented rigidly, like, say, this, it is much closer to, say, this. Or, if you prefer, this. As we can see in the latter charts, a single character can represent any of the 9 different alignments, depending upon their behaviors in that given period of time. With this in mind, for the players out there, beyond your initial choice in your character's starting point, don't concern yourselves with alignment. Simply role-play your character. Learn their motivations and their perceptions and act accordingly. After all, a chaotic evil character can believe themselves to be lawful good the entire time. And Dungeon Masters, likewise, don't concern your players with their alignment. Simply keep track of their position on the chart, and follow through with any consequences of any shifts. It is always sobering for a cleric or paladin to stop hearing the voice of their god, despite the fact that they thought they were behaving accordingly the entire time. I hope you found this quick overview of the alignment chart thought-provoking and at least not entirely infuriating. If not, then prepare yourself for the oncoming migraine, as next time we begin our look at individual alignments, starting with what most gamers consider the easiest to define, chaotic evil.